I'm sitting at my kitchen table folding laundry, my soap opera playing low on the TV, and I find my daughter's diary tucked inside a fitted sheet. My hands start shaking before I even open it. You know that feeling when you know something's wrong but you don't want to know? That's where I was, 62 years old, living in my little cottage here in Baltimore with the peeling paint and my vegetable garden out back. And I'm about to learn that the people I loved most had been lying to my face for years. I never meant to read it. I was just folding, minding my business, listening to my stories like I do every afternoon. But there it was, and once I saw the first entry, I couldn't stop. I'm telling you this because I never thought I'd be the woman whose own family would do something like this. Never. And if you're watching this, maybe you need to hear what happened. Maybe you're wondering if something's happening to you too. Maybe you need to hear that you're not crazy, you're not imagining things, and what's happening to you has a name. Before I go further, I want to ask you something. If this story resonates with you, if you know someone who needs to hear this, please leave a like and subscribe. Not for me, but because someone out there is sitting alone in their kitchen right now, wondering if they're losing their mind, and they need to know they're not alone. They need this to reach them. It started with the documents, you understand. My daughter came to me about 5 years ago saying we needed to organize my affairs. Very smart, very responsible. She had me sign papers for my health care, my finances, everything. I trusted her completely. She was my baby. I raised her right, taught her about loyalty, about keeping the family together no matter what. And that's the belief I held on to. That family comes first. Always, even when things didn't add up. I wore that teal tracksuit back then, when I still went for my morning walks around the complex. You know, the kind, soft material, comfortable, the kind of thing that makes you feel good about yourself when you're trying to stay healthy. I had energy. I had hope. The other ladies and I would talk about our grandkids, our dreams, walking the perimeter of the courtyard where the benches sit and the little kids play. I told them about the Bentley Continental I always wanted, that beautiful cream-colored one. Stupid maybe for a woman like me to dream that big. But I dreamed it anyway. The cottage felt like home then. Sure, the paint was peeling and the windows were old, but it was mine. I had my vegetable garden out back, tomatoes and peppers and greens. I'd bring them inside and cook, and the smell would fill up every room. That was before everything changed, before I realized the walls were closing in. Winter settled in that first year after I signed the papers. The kind of Baltimore winter where the cold seeps into your bones and the sky stays gray for weeks. My windows would fog up from the heat inside. And I'd sit at this same table, organizing my plastic pill organizer. You know the kind. With the days of the week labeled on each compartment. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Every morning, every night, I'd sort my medications. It was routine, something I could control. But even then, something felt off. My daughter would come by, always with more papers, always with that serious look on her face. She'd say things like, "Mom, you need to understand how important this is," and I'd nod and sign because I trusted her. Because I believed that's what family does. You trust each other, you don't question, you stay loyal. The humiliation started small. A comment here, a dismissal there. When I wanted to spend money on myself, I was being selfish. When I asked questions about my own accounts, I was being difficult. My grandson made fun of my clothes, my interests. I sat and watched my soap operas in the afternoons. That was my time, my only peace, and they'd mock me for it. They'd walk through the living room and make comments about how I was wasting my life watching stories instead of doing something productive. Simple dignity. That's all I had left. And they chipped away at it piece by piece. I accepted it because I told myself that's what you do. You sacrifice. You stay quiet. You keep the peace. My mother taught me that. Her mother taught her. You don't make waves. You don't cause problems. You smile and you endure and you hold the family together no matter what. I remember one afternoon, I was making peach cobbler from my grandmother's recipe. The one she wrote down on a stained index card before she passed. Peaches, sugar, butter, cinnamon, that crispy golden top. The smell filled the whole cottage, sweet and warm. I made it for a family dinner, thinking maybe if I did something nice, something they loved, things would get better. I set the table, put out the good plates, waited. They came late. My daughter, her husband, my grandson. They ate in silence, barely looked at me. When I asked about their day, I got one-word answers. When I mentioned that I was thinking about taking a trip to see my cousin in Virginia, my daughter's face went hard. She said, "Mom, you can't afford that. You need to be more responsible with your money." My money. That's what she said. Like it wasn't mine anymore. I didn't take the trip. I stayed home. I folded laundry and watched my stories and organized my pills. I walked around the courtyard less and less. The other ladies would ask where I'd been, and I'd make excuses. The truth was, I was tired. Tired in my bones. Tired in my spirit. And I was starting to feel something else, something I didn't want to name. I was starting to feel small. I had this collection of funeral programs, from people I'd lost over the years. My mother, my grandmother, my best friend from high school, neighbors from the complex. I kept them in a box in my closet, and sometimes I'd take them out and read through them. All these people who loved me, who knew me, who saw me as a whole person. And I'd wonder what they'd think if they could see me now. If they could see how I'd let myself become invisible. But I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was doing the right thing. Family unity. That was what mattered. Keeping everyone together. Making sure my daughter and grandson had what they needed. That's what a good mother does, right? That's what a good grandmother does. You give and you don't complain because love isn't about keeping score. Except somewhere along the way, I stopped existing as anything other than a source of income and convenience. And the worst part? I accepted it. I made excuses for them. When my daughter snapped at me for asking about my bank statements, I told myself she was stressed. When my grandson rolled his eyes at my stories about the old days, I told myself kids are just like that now. When they canceled plans with me at the last minute, I told myself they were busy, they had important things to do. I gave up everything. My morning walks, my dreams of traveling, my sense of worth. I gave it all up because I believed that's what love required. And they let me. They watched me shrink and they didn't stop it. They encouraged it. Because a small, quiet, compliant mother and grandmother was easier to manage, easier to control, easier to exploit. The diary sat in my hands like a bomb. I knew I shouldn't read it. I knew it was wrong. But something in me, some last flicker of self-preservation, made me open it anyway. The cover was purple, worn at the edges from handling. One of those journals with an elastic band to keep it closed. My daughter had always been a writer, ever since she was little. I used to encourage it, bought her pretty notebooks for her birthday, told her to express her feelings. I never thought those feelings would be about destroying me. My fingers trembled as I opened to a random page. The handwriting was hers. That careful cursive I recognized immediately. The date at the top, 3 months ago. My eyes scanned the words once, not really seeing them, my brain refusing to process what was right there in black ink. Then I read it again, slowly this time. Mom signed the refinance papers today. She has no idea what she's signing anymore. Dad says we'll have full control by next year. The soap opera was still playing in the background. Someone was crying, dramatic music swelling, but I couldn't hear it anymore. All I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears, the sound of my world cracking apart. My heart stopped. Actually stopped for a moment, then started again with a painful thud against my ribs. I read it again. And again. Full control. Of what? My house? My accounts? My life? The laundry sat forgotten on the table, a pillowcase half folded, my reading glasses pushed up on my forehead. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. The afternoon light coming through the window seemed different now, harsh instead of warm. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the diary, but I didn't. Instead, I flipped back further, the pages making a soft whisper as I turned them. Earlier entries, more dates, more planning. It was all there, laid out like a blueprint for my destruction. Met with the lawyer again. He says we need to move slowly so Mom doesn't get suspicious. The key is making her think it's all her idea. Mom asked about her savings account today. Told her there was a problem with the bank's computer system and the statement would come next month. She believed me. This is almost too easy. Had dinner at the cottage. She made that peach cobbler again, trying so hard to make us happy. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember how much she has just sitting there, not using it. We need it more than she does. Entry after entry, planning sessions, discussions about my assets, my property, my worth. Not my well-being, my worth. The dollar amount attached to my existence. How much my house was worth. How much was in my retirement accounts. How much they could get if they played their cards right. And they had been playing them for years, while I baked cobbler and folded their laundry and told myself I was being a good mother. There was a detailed entry about a family meeting I didn't even know had happened. My daughter, her husband, even my grandson, all sitting around discussing me like I was a problem to be solved, an asset to be managed. They'd made charts. Actual charts about my finances, my monthly expenses, how much they could take without me noticing. The clinical precision of it made me sick. There was an entry about Thanksgiving, about how they'd decided not to invite me to dinner because it was too much hassle, and they wanted it to be just them. I'd spent that day alone, eating leftover cobbler and watching the parade on TV, telling myself they were probably just busy. But they weren't busy. They were together, without me, by choice. I sat there at the kitchen table, laundry half folded, soap opera still playing, and I felt something break inside me. Not the loud, dramatic kind of break. The quiet kind. The kind where you realize you've been living in a house built on lies and the foundation just gave way. I started going through everything. Every paper I'd signed, every document in my filing cabinet, every statement I could find. I pulled out the metal filing cabinet from the corner of my bedroom, the one that had been my mother's. 2 drawers full of papers, organized by year, by category, the way I'd always kept things. I'd been proud of how organized I was. Now I realized that organization had made me an easier target. I spread everything out on my kitchen table, the laundry forgotten, pushed to the side, the soap opera turned off, the silence heavy and strange. It was dark outside now, the winter night pressing against the windows. I turned on every light in the kitchen, needing to see clearly, needing to understand the full scope of what had been done to me. The first document I examined closely was a power of attorney form, dated 2 years ago. I remembered signing it. My daughter had brought it over on a Tuesday afternoon, right after my doctor's appointment. She'd said it was just a formality, something to make sure she could help me if I ever got sick. "Just in case, Mom," she'd said, smiling that reassuring smile. "We want to make sure you're protected." But looking at it now, really reading the fine print I'd never bothered with, I saw it gave her complete control over everything. My bank accounts, my property, my investments, everything. And the signature at the bottom, the one that was supposed to be mine, looked off. The J in Johnson was too loopy. The E in my first name, Elizabeth, had the wrong slant. It was close, but it wasn't mine. My stomach turned. I pulled out my reading glasses, held the paper up to the light. Had I really signed this? Or had she forged it? I tried to remember that day, that Tuesday afternoon. I'd been tired from the doctor's appointment. She'd put the paper in front of me, pointed to the signature line. Had I actually signed it? Or had I just initialed something, and she'd completed it later? I couldn't remember. That was the most terrifying part. I couldn't remember. I moved to the next document, a refinance agreement for my house, dated 6 months ago. I definitely didn't remember this one. The cottage was paid off, had been for 15 years. Why would I refinance a house that was free and clear? But there was my signature, or something that looked like my signature. And right there, in small print, a clause about my daughter being added to the deed as a joint owner with rights of survivorship. My hands started shaking again. I had to set the paper down, grip the edge of the table to steady myself. Joint owner. That meant if I died, the house went straight to her. No probate, no will, no choice. She'd own it completely. And I had no memory of signing this. None. I went through every document in that filing cabinet. It took me hours. Bank statements showing transfers I didn't recognize, to accounts I'd never opened. Withdrawal slips with my signature, taking out cash in amounts that made no sense. 2,000 here, 3,000 there, always just below the reporting threshold. I found a credit card statement for a card I didn't know I had, maxed out at $15,000. Charges for things I'd never bought, places I'd never been. And the picture that emerged was horrifying. Signatures that didn't look quite like mine, dates that didn't match up, transfers of money I never authorized, contracts for refinancing, for power of attorney, for things I didn't even understand. And under it all, a pattern, a deliberate, calculated pattern of taking control of everything I owned while making me believe I was still in charge. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. The papers covered my entire kitchen table, organized into piles. Forgeries in one pile, suspicious transactions in another, documents I had no memory of signing in a third. The evidence of my daughter's betrayal spread out before me like pieces of a puzzle I'd finally put together. A puzzle that showed my own daughter had been systematically stealing from me for years. That plastic pill organizer sat on the table, and I stared at it. Monday through Sunday. Every day the same. Take your pills, stay quiet, don't make trouble. That's what my life had become. A routine of compliance. And they were counting on it. They were counting on me being too tired, too confused, too loyal to question anything. I found a text message thread on an old phone, one my daughter thought I'd gotten rid of. Messages between her and her husband. Mom's so focused on keeping us happy. She doesn't even read what she signs anymore. This is easier than I thought. By this time next year, we'll have everything. Everything. My home, my savings, my dignity, everything. The collapse wasn't loud. I didn't scream or cry or throw things. I just sat there in the winter cold, the windows fogging up, and I felt the last bit of denial drain out of me. The promises they'd made, the reassurances, the "we're doing this for you, Mom" speeches, they were all empty. Hollow words designed to keep me docile. And they'd worked. Until now. I called in sick to my volunteer work at the church. I stopped answering the phone when my daughter called. I sat in my cottage and I became my own detective. I made copies of everything. I started keeping a journal of every interaction, every conversation, every time something didn't add up. I contacted the bank and asked for records. I reached out to a legal aid service and asked questions. And slowly, piece by piece, I built a case. The first time I asked my daughter a direct question about the money, her face changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. We were standing in my living room. She'd come by unannounced, like she always did, letting herself in with her key. I'd been waiting for her, practicing what I'd say, how I'd ask. My palms were sweating. My heart was racing. But I'd made up my mind. I needed to know. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I was going through some papers, and I noticed some transactions I don't remember. Can we sit down and go over my accounts together?" She was holding her purse, about to set it down on the couch, but she froze, just for a second. Her eyes darted to my face, then away. A flicker of something crossed her expression. Panic. Fear. Then it was gone, smoothed over with concern. "Mom, what are you talking about?" She set her purse down slowly, came over to where I was standing by the window. "Are you feeling okay? Have you been taking your medications?" That was her go-to move, I realized. Deflect. Make it about my competence instead of her actions. But I wasn't going to let her do that this time. "I'm feeling fine," I said. "I just want to understand some of these financial transactions. There's a refinance on the house I don't remember signing, and some withdrawals that seem unusual." Her face shifted again. The concern deepened, but there was something underneath it now. Something harder. "Mom, we talked about this. Remember? Last spring, when interest rates dropped? You said you wanted to take advantage of it. I helped you with the paperwork." "I don't remember that conversation," I said quietly, "and I don't remember signing those papers." She reached out, put her hand on my arm. The gesture that used to comfort me now felt like a trap. "Mom, you're confused. We talked about this. You agreed to this. Maybe we should make an appointment with your doctor. Memory issues can be serious." But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. The gaslighting was right there, blatant and cruel. She was trying to make me doubt my own mind, my own memory. And I told her I wanted to see the original documents. All of them. The ones I'd supposedly signed with my signature on them. Her hand dropped from my arm. The mask slipped a little more. "Why are you doing this? Why are you questioning me? I've been trying to help you, trying to make sure you're taken care of. And this is how you thank me?" The guilt trip. Another weapon in her arsenal. But I'd lived with guilt my whole life. I'd made decisions based on guilt, sacrificed based on guilt, stayed silent based on guilt. And I was done. "I just want to see the documents," I repeated. "If everything is as you say, there's no problem, right? Just bring me the original papers and we can clear this up." She stared at me for a long moment. I could see her calculating, deciding how to play this. Finally, she nodded. "Fine. I'll bring them by next week. They're in storage with our other important papers." "Tomorrow," I said. "Bring them tomorrow." Her jaw tightened. "I have work tomorrow, Mom. I can't just drop everything because you're having some kind of episode." "Then this weekend," I said. "Saturday morning, we'll go through everything together." She picked up her purse, her movements sharp now, the pretense of concern gone. "Fine, Saturday. But I think you're going to feel pretty foolish when you realize you're wrong about this." She left without saying goodbye. And I stood there in my living room, shaking but also strangely calm, because I'd done it. I'd asked. I'd pushed back. And her reaction had told me everything I needed to know. Saturday came and went. She never showed up. She never brought the documents. And when I called her Sunday morning to ask why, she said she'd been too busy. Family emergency with my grandson. Something at work. The excuses varied, but the result was the same. She never did bring those papers, never even tried. I set up a test. I told her I wanted to add my cousin in Virginia as a beneficiary on one of my accounts, just to see what she'd do. And within a week, I got a call from the bank saying someone had tried to access my account using forged documents. Someone with my daughter's signature on the request form. That was it. That was the proof I needed. Not just that she'd done it before, but that she was still doing it. Still forging, still manipulating, still treating my life like something she had the right to control. And the worst part? She thought I'd never find out. She thought I was too old, too loyal, too broken to fight back. But I wasn't broken. I was angry. And anger, real anger, the kind that comes from betrayal this deep, it gives you clarity. It burns away all the excuses and the loyalty and the fear. It leaves you with nothing but the truth. And the truth was this. My own daughter had been stealing from me for years, and she wasn't going to stop unless I made her. I gathered everything I'd collected, every forged document, every statement, every text message. I put it all in a folder and I made an appointment with a lawyer. A real one, not the one my daughter had recommended. And when I sat down in that office and laid it all out, the lawyer's face went serious. She said, "Mrs. Johnson, what's been done to you is illegal. It's elder abuse. And we can stop it." Elder abuse. I'd never thought of it that way. I thought abuse was hitting, screaming, obvious cruelty. I didn't know it could look like contracts and concern and careful manipulation. I didn't know it could wear the face of family. The lawyer filed a complaint with the state. She got a court order freezing my accounts so nothing else could be taken. She contacted the police, and within 2 weeks, detectives were sitting in my living room asking me questions about my daughter. My daughter. The baby I raised. The girl I sacrificed everything for. And I answered every question honestly because I'd reached a point where protecting her meant destroying myself. And I wasn't willing to do that anymore. My daughter found out about the investigation before the police came to her house. She called me, frantic, demanding to know what I'd done. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I didn't try to smooth things over. I just said, "You stole from me. You lied to me. You forged my name. And now you're going to face the consequences." Then I hung up. She showed up at my cottage that night, crying, begging, saying it was all a misunderstanding, saying she was just trying to help me, saying I was confused. I was being manipulated by outsiders who didn't understand our family. And I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw a stranger. Someone who'd been wearing a mask of concern while plotting to take everything I had. Someone who'd counted on my love being stronger than my survival instinct. I didn't let her in. I stood in the doorway and I said, "You need to leave. And you need to get a lawyer, because I'm not backing down." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. And maybe she didn't. Maybe this version of me, the one who fights back, the one who demands respect, was someone she'd never seen before, because I'd never let her see it. I'd been too busy being the good mother, the accommodating mother, the mother who sacrifices everything to keep the peace. But I wasn't that mother anymore. That mother was gone. And in her place was someone who knew her worth. Someone who wasn't going to let anyone, not even her own child, treat her like she was disposable. The next few weeks were chaos. Pure, exhausting chaos. Police interviews where I had to recount everything, show everything, relive every moment of betrayal. The detective assigned to my case was a woman in her 40s named Maria Torres. She sat in my living room, her notepad out, her expression professional but kind, and she listened to everything. "Mrs. Johnson," she said when I finished explaining, "what happened to you is unfortunately more common than people realize. But most victims never come forward. Most stay silent out of fear or shame or misguided loyalty. The fact that you're here, doing this, takes incredible courage." I didn't feel courageous. I felt exhausted, humiliated, angry. But I nodded and kept going, answering every question she asked. She took copies of all my documents, photographed the diary entries, recorded my statement. When she left, she told me the investigation would take time, but that what I'd shown her was enough to move forward. Court dates came next, meetings with lawyers and social workers, depositions where I had to sit across from my daughter's attorney and answer hostile questions designed to make me look incompetent. He asked about my age, my medical history, my daily routine. He asked if I'd ever forgotten to take my medication, ever gotten confused about dates, ever needed help with technology. He was building a picture of an elderly woman who couldn't be trusted to understand her own finances. But my lawyer, Sarah Chen, was better. She was sharp and prepared, and she didn't let him twist my words. When he asked if I sometimes forgot things, she objected and rephrased. "Mrs. Johnson, do you understand what your daughter did with your money?" "Yes." "Do you understand that forging your signature is illegal?" "Yes." Are you capable of managing your own affairs? Yes, I am. My daughter hired her own attorney, someone expensive who tried to paint me as confused, as vindictive, as a mother who didn't understand what her daughter had been doing for her. He sent letters claiming I'd authorized everything, that I was being manipulated by outsiders, that this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by a confused elderly woman. But I had the documents. I had the proof. Bank records showing forged signatures, the diary with detailed plans written in my daughter's own handwriting, testimony from my grandson about what he'd witnessed, expert analysis of the signatures showing they weren't mine. And I had something else. I had my voice, and I used it. There were preliminary hearings where I had to testify about specific incidents. I remember one in particular, sitting in that courtroom with its fluorescent lights and hard wooden benches, my daughter sitting 20 feet away with her lawyer, refusing to look at me. The prosecutor asked me to identify a specific document, a withdrawal slip for $5,000. Is that your signature, Mrs. Johnson? I looked at it closely, then shook my head. No, it's close, but it's not mine. The way the E loops, that's wrong. I make my E's with a straight back, not curved like that. How can you be sure? Because I've been signing my name for 62 years, I said, looking directly at my daughter for the first time. I know my own signature, and that's not it. She still wouldn't meet my eyes, just sat there, stone-faced, while her lawyer objected and argued and tried to create reasonable doubt. But the truth was too clear, the evidence too strong. And slowly, case by case, hearing by hearing, the legal system started to see what I'd been living with for years. I went to the courthouse, to the hearing where they'd decide whether to press charges. It was a cold morning in February, the kind where your breath makes clouds in the air. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought for my mother's funeral years ago. I wanted to look dignified, strong, like someone who knew her own mind. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, a high ceiling, rows of benches like pews in a church. My daughter sat across the room with her lawyer, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She was wearing black, her hair pulled back, trying to look respectable, trying to look like the victim. When I walked in, her eyes flickered toward me, then quickly away. I sat in the front row on the prosecutor's side. Sarah, my lawyer, sat beside me. She squeezed my hand once, briefly, then folded her hands in her lap. "You've got this," she whispered. "Just tell the truth." The judge came in, an older black woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Everyone stood, then sat. The formalities began. The prosecutor laid out the charges: 3 counts of fraud, 2 counts of elder abuse, 1 count of forgery. Each charge was explained, documented, supported by evidence. My daughter sat motionless, her face blank. Then it was my turn. And when the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, asked if I had anything to say before she made her ruling, I stood up. My legs were shaking. My hands trembled as I gripped the railing in front of me. But my voice, when I spoke, was steady. "Your Honor, my name is Elizabeth Johnson. I'm 62 years old, and I'm here today because my daughter, the woman I raised, the child I loved more than my own life, has been stealing from me for years." I heard my daughter shift in her seat behind me, but I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the judge. "She didn't just take my money," I continued. "She took my dignity, my autonomy, my right to control my own life. She made me feel small and stupid and incompetent. She humiliated me in front of my own family, and she did it all while pretending to care about me, while telling me she was helping me, while making me believe that questioning her meant I was ungrateful or confused." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, just listening. I signed papers because I trusted her, because I believed that's what mothers do. They trust their children, and she used that trust like a weapon. She forged my signature. She transferred my money. She planned to have me declared incompetent so she could take everything I owned and put me in a facility where I couldn't fight back. My voice cracked on that last part, but I kept going. I loved her more than anything. I would have given her anything if she'd just asked. If she'd been honest with me. If she'd treated me like a person instead of a bank account. And she used that love to destroy me. She counted on it. She weaponized it. She turned the most important relationship in my life into a con. I paused, took a breath. The judge was watching me intently, her expression unreadable. But I'm still here. I'm still standing. I found the truth, and I'm facing it, no matter how much it hurts. And I'm not going to be silent anymore. Not about what she did, not about what elder abuse looks like, not about how it can happen to anyone, even someone who thinks they're being careful, who thinks their family would never hurt them. I turned then, looked directly at my daughter for the first time since I'd started speaking. She was crying silently, tears running down her face. But I couldn't tell if they were tears of remorse or just fear of consequences. I want justice, I said, turning back to the judge. Not revenge. Justice. I want her to be held accountable for what she did. And I want other people to know that this happens, that it's real, and that staying silent only makes it worse. Thank you. I sat down. My whole body was shaking now, adrenaline coursing through me. Sarah squeezed my hand again. On the other side of the courtroom, my daughter's lawyer stood up to speak, but I barely heard what he said. Something about misunderstandings, about a daughter trying to help, about circumstances being more complex than they appeared. But the judge had heard enough. When both sides had finished, she looked at my daughter, her expression stern. Based on the evidence presented and the testimony I've heard today, I'm finding probable cause to move forward with all charges. This will proceed to trial. The judge granted a restraining order. My daughter was ordered to stay away from me, from my home, from my finances. The district attorney decided to press charges for fraud and elder abuse. And just like that, the daughter I'd raised, the one I'd given everything to, became a defendant in a criminal case. I thought I'd feel guilty. I thought I'd regret it. But I didn't. I felt relief. I felt free. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I could make decisions without wondering if someone was going to manipulate me. I could look at my bank statements without fear. I could exist as a whole person again. But the story didn't end there. It never does it? Because just when you think you've survived the worst, just when you think you've climbed out of the hole, something else happens. And for me, that something came in the form of a phone call from my grandson. He was 18 now, old enough to have been part of it, old enough to have known what his mother was doing. And he called me one night, his voice shaking, and he said, "Grandma, I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. I thought he was going to apologize, to say he didn't know, to ask for forgiveness. But that's not what he said. He said, "Mom's been planning this for a long time, since before Dad died. She has files on you, strategies, everything. And there's more. Things you don't know about yet." My hands went cold. I was sitting on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear, the room dark except for the lamp beside me. More? What else could there be? How much worse could it get? "What do you mean more?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I heard him take a shaky breath on the other end. "Grandma, she has. There's another set of documents. Medical power of attorney. I found them in her office when I was looking for something else. She has the right to make all your healthcare decisions if she says you can't make them yourself." The room tilted. I had to put my hand on the armrest to steady myself. Medical decisions? What kind of medical decisions? "All of them," he said. And I could hear the guilt in his voice. "Where you live, what treatment you get, whether you stay in your home or go somewhere else." Go somewhere else. He meant a facility, a nursing home. She could have me declared incompetent and locked away, and there was nothing I could do about it. That had been her backup plan all along. If I fought back, if I questioned her, she'd have me put away, out of sight, under her complete control. "Did you know?" I asked. "Did you know she was planning this?" Silence. Then, "I knew some of it, not everything. I don't know what I thought, that it was normal maybe, that everyone handles their parents' stuff like this. But then I started really looking at what she was doing, reading those documents, seeing the amounts of money, and I realized it wasn't normal. It was wrong. Really wrong. Why are you telling me now?" I needed to know. Was this guilt, genuine concern, or some other manipulation I hadn't figured out yet? "Because I can't be part of it anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't watch her do this to you and pretend it's okay. You're my grandmother. You used to bake me cookies and take me to the park and tell me stories about when Mom was little. You didn't deserve this. You don't deserve this." I closed my eyes. That little boy I'd raised, the one who'd sat at my kitchen table doing homework and eating cobbler, he was still in there somewhere, buried under his mother's influence, under the greed and the lies, but still there. "Where are these documents?" I asked. "The medical power of attorney?" "She keeps everything in a filing cabinet in her home office, top drawer, in a folder labeled Mom, Legal. There's more in there too, notes about your spending habits, a timeline of when she started taking control, even a list of things you've said that she could use to make you seem incompetent if she needed to." My stomach turned. A list. She'd been documenting everything I said, every small mistake, every forgotten name or confused moment, building a case against me, building evidence that I couldn't take care of myself, all while pretending to be the concerned, loving daughter. "There's something else," my grandson said, his voice smaller now. "She's been talking about moving you out of the cottage, selling it. She found a facility that's cheaper than your current expenses, and she was planning to put you there and keep the difference. I heard her on the phone with Dad about it last week. He told me about a second set of documents, ones I'd never seen, that gave my daughter power of attorney over my medical decisions. Documents that would let her put me in a facility if she decided I was incapable of caring for myself. And she'd been actively planning it, not as a last resort, as a strategy. A way to maximize her profit from my existence. I felt sick. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. Total control. She'd been planning to take everything, and if I resisted, she'd have me declared incompetent and locked away. That was the plan. That was always the plan. And I'd been signing papers and making cobbler and watching my soap operas, completely oblivious to the trap being built around me. But here's the thing about learning the full truth. It hurts worse than you can imagine, but it also sets you completely free. Because once you know the absolute worst, once you see the full scope of the betrayal, there's no more doubt, no more second guessing, no more wondering if maybe you're overreacting. You know. And knowing is power. I took what my grandson told me, and I went back to my lawyer. We filed additional motions. We got those medical documents invalidated. We built an even stronger case. And when the trial finally came, when my daughter sat in that courtroom and had to face what she'd done, I was there. I sat in the front row, and I looked her in the eye, and I didn't flinch. The jury found her guilty on 3 counts of fraud and 2 counts of elder abuse. The judge sentenced her to probation, restitution, and community service. She'd have a criminal record now. She'd have to pay back every dollar she took. And she'd have to live with the knowledge that her own mother put her there, that her greed and manipulation had cost her everything. I thought that would be the moment of victory, the justice I'd been waiting for. But it wasn't. Because justice doesn't heal you. It doesn't give you back the years you lost or the trust that was broken. It just closes one chapter so you can start another. And that's what I had to do. Start another chapter. I sat in my cottage after the trial, the same cottage where this all began, and I looked around. The peeling paint, the fogged windows, the pile of funeral programs in the closet. This place held so much pain, so much loneliness, and I realized I didn't want to stay here anymore. I wanted something different, something mine. I started rebuilding, not the way I'd lived before, not going back to who I was, but creating something entirely new. I reached out to the women from the complex, the ones I used to walk with in the mornings. I told them everything, and instead of judgment or pity, they gave me understanding. They shared their own stories, their own betrayals, their own fights. And slowly, we became something more than neighbors. We became family, the kind you choose, the kind that shows up. We started having dinners together. Nothing fancy, just simple meals in each other's homes. I made my peach cobbler, and someone else made their mama's mac and cheese, and someone else brought sweet tea. We laughed. We cried. We talked about our lives without shame or pretense. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. Really seen. Not as someone's mother or someone's source of income, but as myself. As a woman with dreams and opinions and worth. I started saving money again. Real money, for myself. I opened a new account that only I had access to. I changed all my passwords. I took control of every aspect of my finances. And I started planning for the future. Not the future my daughter wanted for me, but the future I wanted. I found a farmhouse for sale 2 hours outside Baltimore. It had land, space, a wraparound porch. It needed work, but it was beautiful. And it was exactly what I'd been dreaming of without even realizing it. Space to breathe. Space to be. I put in an offer, and when it was accepted, I sat on my bed in the cottage and I cried. Not sad tears, but tears of release. Of possibility. Of starting over at 62 years old and knowing that it's never too late. Never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to demand respect. Never too late to build the life you actually want instead of the one you've been told to accept. I packed up the cottage slowly, deliberately, taking time with each room, each drawer, each closet. It was more than just moving. It was releasing. Letting go of the woman I'd been in this place, the one who'd been small and quiet and compliant. That woman was staying behind in these walls. I started with the kitchen, the room where I'd found the diary, where everything had changed. I wrapped my dishes in newspaper, the everyday ones I'd used for years, and the fancy china I'd inherited from my grandmother. Each plate, each cup had a memory. I held them for a moment before putting them in boxes, saying goodbye to what they represented. The drawer with the plastic pill organizer sat open, and I stared at it for a long time. Monday through Sunday, those little compartments that had governed my life, that had represented routine and compliance and just getting through, I threw it in the trash. At the farmhouse, I'd find a new system, or maybe I wouldn't need one at all. Maybe I'd just take my pills when I needed them, without the rigid structure that had made me feel like a child being managed. I sorted through everything, deciding what to keep and what to let go. The peach cobbler recipe card, stained and worn, went into my keep pile. My grandmother's handwriting was on that card, and it represented love that was real, not manipulated. The teal tracksuit I'd worn on my morning walk stayed too, even though I hadn't worn it in years. Maybe I'd start walking again, around my new property, in the fresh air where no one was watching, no one was judging. But there were things I couldn't keep. The filing cabinet full of forged documents, empty now that everything had been submitted as evidence. The chair where my daughter used to sit during her visits, pretending to care while she plotted. The TV where I'd watched my soap operas, numbing myself to the reality of my situation. These things were tied too closely to my old life, to the version of myself I was leaving behind. I found old photos in a box in my closet. My daughter as a baby, pudgy and smiling. My daughter as a toddler, holding my hand at the park. My daughter at her high school graduation, proud and beautiful. My daughter on her wedding day, tears of joy in her eyes. I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by these images, and I felt a pang, a deep ache in my chest. This was grief, real grief, not for the woman she'd become, but for the girl she'd been. For the relationship we'd had before greed twisted it into something unrecognizable. For the dreams I'd had about us growing old together, grandmother and daughter, close and loving. All of that was gone, dead and buried under lies and forged signatures and calculated manipulation. I let myself cry. Sitting there on the floor with photos scattered around me, I cried for the first time since this all began. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I'd been keeping locked away. I cried for that little girl who'd needed me, who'd loved me, who'd been innocent once. I cried for the mother I'd been, the one who'd tried so hard to do everything right and still ended up here. I cried for the years lost, the trust destroyed, the family broken beyond repair. But when the tears stopped, when I'd cried myself empty, I made a decision. I sorted through the photos, kept a few of the early ones, the ones where the love was still real and uncomplicated. The rest went into a box, sealed with tape. I wrote memories on the side in marker. I'd keep them, but I wouldn't look at them. Not now. Maybe not ever. They were part of my history, but they weren't my future. And I felt a pang, a grief for who she could have been if greed hadn't twisted her. But I didn't let that grief stop me. I put the photos in a box, and I moved forward. Because that's what you do when you choose life. You grieve what was lost, but you don't let it trap you. You acknowledge the pain, and then you keep walking. You pack your boxes, load your truck, and drive towards something new. Moving day came on a Saturday in early spring. The winter had finally broken, and the air smelled like new growth. Daffodils were pushing up through the soil in the courtyard, yellow and bright against the gray concrete. The morning was cool but clear, the kind of day that promises warmth by afternoon. Perfect for new beginnings. My chosen family, my tribe of women from the complex, showed up at 8 in the morning with coffee and donuts and determination. There was Joyce, who'd lost her husband to cancer and understood grief. There was Patricia, who'd been fighting her own battle with a manipulative son. There was Denise, who'd survived an abusive marriage and recognized the signs of control in all its forms. And there was Maria, Carmen, and Linda, all of them carrying their own stories of survival, their own reasons for understanding why this move mattered. They didn't just help me pack the truck. They celebrated with me. Joyce brought champagne and plastic cups, said we were going to toast my new life before we left. Patricia had made a playlist of songs about strength and freedom, and she played it loud from her phone while we carried boxes. Denise kept making jokes, keeping the mood light even when we found things that hurt to pack, things that carried memories I'd rather forget. "This going to the new house or the trash?" Carmen asked, holding up a decorative pillow my daughter had given me 3 Christmases ago. I looked at it, considered. It was pretty, objectively, cream-colored with gold stitching. But every time I'd looked at it on my couch, I'd thought of her, of what I'd believed our relationship was, of the lies hidden behind the gift. "Trash," I said. "Definitely trash." Carmen grinned and tossed it into the donation pile with theatrical flair. Good. It was ugly anyway. It wasn't, but I appreciated the solidarity. They carried boxes and laughed and told me how proud they were. "You're the bravest woman I know," Joyce said, loading my grandmother's china into the truck with careful hands. "What you did, standing up to your own daughter, taking her to court, that took guts most people don't have." "I didn't feel brave," I admitted. "I felt terrified most of the time." "That's what makes it brave," Patricia said from inside the truck, arranging boxes. "Being scared and doing it anyway. That's courage, Elizabeth. We worked all morning, emptying the cottage room by room. The truck filled up steadily. My entire life packed into boxes and furniture and bags. By noon, we were down to the last few items. I walked through the empty rooms one more time, my footsteps echoing on the bare floors. The cottage looked smaller without my things in it. Sadder, like it knew it was being abandoned too. But it was just a building. 4 walls and a roof. The real home, the real family, was loading the truck outside, was following me to the farmhouse in a caravan of cars, was choosing to show up and be present and celebrate my survival. That was what mattered. And as we drove away from that little cottage with the peeling paint, my tribe following behind me in their cars like a protective convoy, I looked back one last time through the rearview mirror. The cottage got smaller, then disappeared around a corner. Not with regret, but with gratitude. Gratitude that I'd survived. Gratitude that I'd found my strength. Gratitude that I was here, alive, free. And gratitude for the women who'd shown me what real family looks like. People who show up, who celebrate your victories, who help you carry your boxes toward a better life. The farmhouse needed work, but it was mine. I spent the first month painting walls, planting a garden bigger than anything I'd had before, sitting on the porch watching the sun set over open fields. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a old mutt with gray around his muzzle who'd been abandoned too. We understood each other. We were both starting over. We were both learning to trust again. I didn't hear from my daughter for months after the trial. No calls, no letters, no attempts to reach out. And honestly, I was okay with that. I needed the space. I needed to heal without her presence complicating things. But then one day, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. I held it for a long time, debating whether to open it or throw it away. Finally, I opened it. It was an apology. Sort of. I sat on my porch with that letter, the farmhouse quiet around me except for the sound of birds and the rustle of wind through the fields. My dog was at my feet, his warm weight against my leg. I read the letter slowly, carefully, trying to understand what she was really saying. "Dear Mom," it began, not "Dear Mama" like she used to call me when she was little. Not even Mother. Just Mom. Formal, distant. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I want you to know that I'm sorry for hurting you. That was never my intention. I was trying to help, trying to make sure you were taken care of, but I can see now that I went about it the wrong way." I paused, reread that line. Went about it the wrong way. Like she'd made a small mistake in judgment, not committed fraud and elder abuse. Like she'd accidentally hurt my feelings instead of systematically stealing from me for years. The letter continued. She said she was sorry for what she'd done. But then came the excuses, tried to explain why she'd felt justified. Paragraph after paragraph of reasons, explanations, circumstances that had led her to make the choices she made. She said she'd been scared about her own financial future, scared about providing for my grandson after her husband lost his job. She said she'd looked at my accounts and seen all that money just sitting there, not being used, while she was struggling to pay bills. "I thought you wouldn't miss it," she wrote. "You've always lived simply, always been careful with money. I thought I was just borrowing what you didn't need anyway. I was going to pay it back eventually, I really was. But then things got more complicated and I didn't know how to stop." She said she thought I wouldn't miss the money, that I didn't need it anyway. And that's when I knew. She still didn't get it. She still didn't understand that what she'd taken wasn't just money. It was my dignity, my autonomy, my right to control my own life, my ability to choose what I did with what was mine, my trust in my own daughter. The letter ended with a request. "I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope we can rebuild our relationship. I miss you, Mom. I miss having you in my life. And I know grandson's name misses you too. He asks about you all the time. Maybe we could start slow, coffee sometime? Just to talk. No pressure, no expectations, just a chance to start healing. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. My hands were steady. My heart rate was normal. I felt nothing reading it except a kind of sad clarity. She'd learned nothing, understood nothing. The apology was performative, designed to manipulate me into letting her back into my life so she could try again, maybe more carefully this time. Or maybe I was being too cynical. Maybe she really did feel sorry, in her own limited way. Maybe this was the best she was capable of, but it didn't matter. Because even if her regret was genuine, even if she truly believed her own excuses, it didn't change what she'd done. It didn't undo the damage. And it didn't mean I had to accept her back into my life. I sat on my porch with that letter and I wrote a response. Everything I wanted to say. Every bit of anger, every ounce of hurt, every moment of betrayal. I wrote for hours, filling pages with the truth of what she'd done to me. And when I was finished, when I'd said everything I needed to say, I did something I never thought I'd do. I burned it. I watched the pages curl and blacken in the fire pit, the smoke rising into the clear sky. And as it burned, I felt something lift. I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need her to truly apologize. I didn't need anything from her anymore. That letter, that act of releasing it into flames, was my liberation. My final step away from needing her validation or her love. I was free. Completely free. Life on the farm became something I'd never expected. Joyful. I woke up when I wanted. I spent my days however I chose. I invited my friends out for weekends, and we'd sit on the porch drinking wine and telling stories. I volunteered at the local library, started a book club, learned to make furniture from old barnwood. I became someone I didn't recognize from before. Someone confident, someone whole. My grandson reached out eventually. He wanted to see me, to explain, to rebuild some kind of relationship. I was hesitant, but I agreed to meet him in a public place. We sat in a diner, and he told me he was sorry, that he'd been young and stupid and had gone along with his mother because he didn't know better. He said he'd cut ties with her, that he was trying to make his own way now. And I believed him. Not completely, not yet, but enough to give him a chance. We started slow. Coffee once a month. Phone calls on holidays. I didn't let him back into my finances or my life in any deep way, but I left the door open for the possibility of trust. Because that's what healing looks like sometimes. It's messy and incomplete and full of boundaries. But it's still movement forward. As I sit here now, almost a year after everything fell apart and came back together, I think about how different my life looks. The farmhouse is full of light. The garden is thriving. My dog sleeps at my feet. My friends are coming over later for dinner, and I'm happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Not because everything is perfect, but because I fought for this. I chose this. I built this with my own hands and my own courage. I think about that plastic pill organizer sometimes, the one that used to sit on my kitchen table in the cottage. The routine of it. The compliance it represented. And I'm glad I don't need that kind of structure anymore. I'm glad my life is bigger than a 7-day cycle of just getting through. I'm glad I took the risk, faced the pain, and came out the other side. So here's what I want you to hear, what I need you to understand if you're watching this. It can happen to anyone. Elder abuse isn't always obvious. It doesn't always look like violence or screaming. Sometimes it looks like concern. Sometimes it wears the face of family. Sometimes it's hidden in paperwork and promises, and the slow erosion of your autonomy. And if you're experiencing it, if you're wondering whether what's happening to you is wrong, trust that feeling. Trust yourself. All 50 American states have laws protecting vulnerable adults. 50. That means you have rights, you have protections, You have legal backup if you're being exploited like I was. And the Elder Justice Act of 2010 was the first comprehensive federal law on elder abuse. People fought for these protections so that women and men like us would know we're not alone, that what's happening to us is a crime, that we deserve justice. Look at your own situation. Really look. Are you making decisions that don't feel right just to keep the peace? Are you being humiliated or controlled? Are you signing things you don't understand? Are people isolating you from friends, from information, from your own resources? Could this be happening to you? Because if it is, I want you to know something. It's not your fault. You're not stupid or weak or gullible. You're human. You loved people and you trusted them and they used that against you. But you can stop it. You can fight back. You can reclaim your life. It won't be easy. It'll hurt in ways you can't imagine. You'll lose people you thought you couldn't live without. You'll face judgment and manipulation and guilt. But on the other side of that pain is freedom. Real freedom. The kind where you wake up in your own home, in your own life, and you know that every choice you make is yours. That's worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for. I spent 62 years believing that being a good mother meant sacrificing everything. And maybe that's true in some ways. But it's not supposed to mean sacrificing yourself. It's not supposed to mean accepting abuse because it comes from people you love. Love shouldn't cost you your dignity. It shouldn't cost you your safety. It shouldn't cost you your life. So if you're sitting there right now, in your own kitchen, folding your own laundry, wondering if you're crazy for thinking something's wrong, hear me. You're not crazy. You're awake. And being awake is the first step. The next step is action. Small actions, careful actions, but action nonetheless. Document everything. Ask questions. Reach out for help. Build your case. Protect yourself. Because no one else is going to do it for you. And to anyone watching this who sees themselves in my daughter's story, who recognizes that maybe they've been taking advantage of an elderly parent or grandparent, I'll say this. Stop. Stop before you destroy the relationship completely. Stop before you end up in a courtroom. Stop before you lose someone who loved you more than anything. It's not too late to make different choices. It's not too late to be better. But you have to choose it. You have to do the work. I still think about that Bentley Continental sometimes, the cream-colored one I used to dream about. And you know what? I don't need it anymore. I have something better. I have peace. I have freedom. I have a life I built on my own terms. And that's worth more than any car, any amount of money, any false promise of family unity. The sun is setting over my fields right now, painting the sky pink and gold. My dog is barking at something in the distance. My friends will be here soon, bringing food and laughter and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. And I'm sitting here on my porch, in my farmhouse, living the life I fought for. And it's beautiful. It's so damn beautiful. So I'll leave you with this. Have you lived this? Do you know someone who has? Because if you do, don't stay silent. Speak up. Share this story. Let it reach someone who needs to hear it. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know there's a way out. Let them know that on the other side of the pain is a life worth living. And please, if this resonated with you, leave a like and subscribe. Not for me, but for the next person who needs to find this message. For the grandmother sitting alone, wondering if she's imagining things. For the grandfather being manipulated by his own children. For anyone who needs to know that speaking up is possible, that fighting back is allowed, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And if you're fighting your own battle right now, know this. You're stronger than you think. You're braver than you know. And you deserve a life where you're treated with respect and dignity and love. Don't settle for anything less. Ever.